From the BBC World Service, in association with ABC and Akashvani, this is Stumped.
Hello and welcome to Stumped, your intercontinental hit of news, features and debate from the quirky world of cricket. I'm Alison Mitchell in London, but I was keeping in close contact with Melbourne overnight because the former members of the Afghanistan women's cricket team have been playing a match together for the very first time. But it was a really significant and, fairly emotional occasion.
I'm Clint Wheeldon for the ABC. I'm in Perth, filling in for Jim Maxwell. And while we're sweltering here in the west with a run of hot weather, it gives you the excuse to stay indoors and watch the Australian men in Sri Lanka, where Steve Smith became the latest member of the 10,000 Test Runs Club. He's the 15th player in history to do so, and the 4th Aussie. It was a tremendous moment and great to see.
Well, congratulations to Steve, and I'm so glad that the Afghan women are finally getting to play. This is Charu Sharma for Akashvani. I'm home in Bangalore, enjoying some very agreeable weather and keeping a very sharp eye on the T20 series where India leapt to a lead, but of course England have done fairly well thereafter.
Yep, the series is alive. Coming up later in the show, with the Women's Ashes Test taking place at the Melbourne Cricket Ground, we're going to find out about the last time a women's test match was played there, all the way back in 1949. But first, the ICC, the International Cricket Council, needs a new chief executive, as Geoff Allardice has left his role as CEO of World Cricket's governing body after 4 years in the job. In a statement, he said it was to pursue other challenges. Now, Allardice was appointed as CEO in 2021, and during his tenure has been involved in some major developments, including bringing the Men's T20 World Cup to the USA and the creation of the World Test Championship. But him leaving comes less than 2 months after India's Shah became chair, and with the Champions Trophy due to get underway just next month, an event that's been dogged with organisational challenges. Now, Clint and Charu, this is a lot of change at the ICC because Greg Barclay's tenure as chair came to an end. Shah has come in, and in the last few months we've seen the departure of a number of other senior personnel, the ICC head of events, head of communications and head of the anti-corruption unit as well, in Alex Marshall. What do you make of Allardice going, Clint, and the timing of it, first of all?
It's not uncommon when a new chair comes in that there's going to be all these changes in executive positions. And my question is, will we ever really find out the whys and the wherefores? There's certainly an element, I reckon, of negotiated departure when these positions come up because a new chair's coming in. And whatever you've read from any organisation, news organisation around the world, there does appear to be some tension, as you said, about the venues for the Champions Trophy and their readiness. And there also seems to be some unhappiness about the T20 World Cup in the United States and how that panned out. So, look, I wish him the best. Certainly it was a tough 4 years that he's gone through, but I'm always a little bit curious when you see that amount of turnover at any sporting organisation in such a short period of time, and it comes often when a new chair steps into the role.
Now, well, the new chair, as you mentioned, Alison, stepped in only a couple of months ago. But most of those changes, except for Allardice, were well before that new chair came in. So, all may not be well for several reasons, and not just because of the new chair. I agree with you, Clint, because when new people come in, they'd like to surround themselves with people they know better, perhaps, or a new crew. What we don't need is all this PR. I know I'm asking for too much, perhaps, because both sides will come up with wonderful PR statements, but we'll never know the truth will be. And therefore, we'll have to live with all the rumor and conjecture about what went wrong. And the changes, I'm sure, haven't come because, or voluntarily. There has to be a lot more to it. You mentioned a few of the problems as well. There have been successes and a few things that haven't gone too well. I think the whole America move was certainly a little undercooked. The country wasn't ready. A couple of grounds in Pakistan are not ready. So those are mistakes that, or situations that needed a lot more thought.
Well, as regards Geoff Allardice, it's my understanding from speaking to sources within the ICC that he was asked to leave, with Shah wanting to bring in his own people, which speaks to what you were saying, Clint, about, naturally when new bosses come in at the top of an organisation, they do like to make their own appointments, don't they? How would you assess Allardice's time at the Hell? Because in partnership with Greg Barclay, when he was chair, they played key roles in getting cricket into the Olympics in 2028, for example. But, roles like that always bring challenges too, doesn't it, in implementing the wishes of the board and running an organisation?
I think getting cricket into the Olympics is a huge, huge plus for me. the Olympics has the ability to take cricket to nations where nobody would have had any real interest in it before. And we've seen, if I draw a line to what rugby union has seen from the sevens and the plus that rugby union has got of having sevens in the Olympics. And the sevens actually funds the 15-a-side game on many respects because of the success of having that in the Olympics. So having cricket with an involvement, you can see similar abilities for nations to build as a cricket-playing nation because of it. So I think that's a huge plus. I thought the creation of a World Test Championship was a big plus. We did wonder about how that would work, but you only had to see the frustration from the Australians, who were all a bit like, oh, does it really matter, until they didn't play in the first final of the World Test Championships, and suddenly it was like, oh no, we're missing out. We want to be a part of this. So hindsight gives us the ability to judge that as a real win for what he was able to do. And the other real big plus, I think, would have been able to get DRS implemented as across the world, convincing the BCCI to be able to tick that off. I mean, I remember enough times where it was out of India, and Charu would probably be able to back this up, that they just simply didn't want it. So getting DRS in across the globe at the international level, I thought was a really big win. He also needs, I think, some credit for his role in helping the game through the end of the COVID-19 pandemic. So that's something he should be really proud of. I guess the negatives, as you spoke of and we've touched on, it's been reasonably well reported, but concerns over what happened to the T20 World Cup in the United States, some unexpected losses we've read about, simply some of it, whether you can blame the CEO, the old cliche about the buck stopping with him, some of the pitches, some of the venues simply weren't ready, they weren't up to standards. And as you've mentioned before, there has been a bit of discussion about concerns over where the situation is with the Champions Trophy and some of the venues. Personally, I'm never comfortable with the ICC, who says that 4 member nations need a men's and a women's team, and yet one of them doesn't have one. And I'm also sceptical of the view that's been put forward by the ICC that, I'll quote here, its stance is that the ACB, Afghanistan, is not in control of government policy and therefore players should not be punished for it. Well, I'd make this point: what board's actually in control of government policy? And if it's impossible to fulfil this requirement, well, why even have it? And I just don't think that whole situation was handled particularly well.
Just a note on that, because the ICC's membership criteria includes a clause that says if a country can't fulfil its member criteria, i.e. doesn't have a women's team in this case, if they can demonstrate, quotes, extenuating circumstances as to why they can't fulfil member criteria, then the ICC can, at its sole discretion, award or maintain membership status regardless. So in a sense, the ICC have written in a rule which allows them to break their own overarching rules, if you know what I mean.
It's a cop-out.
I'm just giving,
I'm sorry, but
giving the facts,
cop-out.
And we've heard the ICC side of it.
Old, we'll put this stuff in place until it becomes so we can feel really good that we're doing the right thing for the women's game, until it gets a bit tough. And then we'll cop out by putting all these other things in place. You can put it whatever way you like, and I fully understand the argument for it. The men's players have done nothing wrong. Why do you punish them? Why do you punish people who love cricket in Afghanistan?
But you don't have to punish the men in order to support women, do you?
No, you don't. And so therefore there needs to be more done for the women's team, which I know we're going to talk about. I was wholly uncomfortable with the whole way that was handled.
Alison, it's not an easy job, perhaps a crown of thorns. The chief executive at any rate, and of course the rest of the departures you mentioned. But are there people in line? Have you heard anything whether certain people could quickly take over?
Well, I've been thinking about this, Charu, and significantly what you say there about having someone that has an appreciation of cricket in the subcontinent. The first person I thought of, regardless of that, who to my mind is in prime position to step up, is Wasim Khan, who is currently the ICC's General Manager of Cricket. Has been there since 2022. But before that, he was Chief Executive of the Pakistan Cricket Board. He's British Asian by origin. He's seen all angles of the game because he's been a player. He's been involved at the Players Union. He's been CEO of a charity, so he's seen grassroots cricket as well. And he's been chief executive of a domestic county in England, but then, of course, moving through to the PCB and then the ICC. So he's been moving in that direction. I know he's somebody of ambition, who's very, very capable, but you would have somebody of, it would be quite incredible having, go on, what's your take?
I'm so sorry for interrupting, but it would take an enormous amount of statesmanship for Mr. Shah and some of the others to accept somebody from across the border, knowing the situation. Of course, you mentioned he's British Asian. Still, it would be an incredible move to get somebody from a PCB background.
It would. He's almost throwing the gauntlet down to Jay Shah. Can he be that statesman who can work with somebody of Pakistan origin, a former CEO of the PCB? But Wasim Khan does bring that ability to understand both cultures, if you know what I mean, in terms of, if you like to split it between subcontinent and Western culture, then Wasim Khan does, straddle that divide. He's got an understanding and appreciation of both, which could be very, very powerful in a chief executive position. Other names that I've heard being mentioned is the Disney star head of sports, Sanjog Gupta, which would be a different type of appointee. But then you mentioned governance, and from a governance point of view, I don't believe the ICC has ever had a chair and chief executive from the same country. So whether that's important to the ICC, whether that would, whether Jay Shah would care about the optics of that at all, or whether members would mind about having chair and CEO from the same country, but that might be a consideration. Even the name of Tom Harrison sort of has cropped up as a former ECB chief executive, but I think he's involved in rugby at the moment. But also, I'm not sure how the dynamics of that would work with him having been relatively recently, in charge of the ECB, and then relations with those, who now fulfill those roles as chair and CEO of that organisation, of course, need to work with at ICC board level. Let's go on to a few lighter subjects just to finish up chatting about the ICC, because they announced their 2024 ICC Awards, celebrating the best players and moments from the last year across various categories. Some big winners being New Zealand's Mealy Kerr, who won the overall Women's Cricketer of the Year, and Jasprit Bumrah, who won the Men's Award. Clint, though, no Aussies in there at all.
I was surprised there was no Australian player in the one-day international side as the reigning one-day international champions, and only one player in the test side, Pat Cummins, and everyone says, who would it be? And it's really simple. I would have had Travis Head in both of those teams. And without waving the Australian flag, I would have almost thought Travis Head as one of the first picked from what he was able to do. And if you have a look through, I know he didn't play as many tests as some of the other nations did, but Travis Head, time and time again, was man of the match or player of the series in so many of when Australia actually needed someone to step up, and did it time and time again. So, look, I don't have issues with the individual awards, and I know it's always hard to take somebody out, but I just thought Travis Head was the one player who absolutely needed to be involved.
Now, finally, on Stumped, history has been made at the Melbourne Cricket Ground with a women's test taking place there for the first time since 1949. It's part of the multi-format Ashes series, which Australia has already won, and the match celebrates the 90th anniversary of women's test cricket. David Studham is the librarian at the Melbourne Cricket Ground, where they document sport throughout the ages, and he's first of all been telling me about their collection.
It's a multi-sport library, not just cricket. We cover the sports played at the Melbourne Cricket Ground and by the Melbourne Cricket Club. So they play 14 different sports. But our key sport is, of course, cricket, because it is the Melbourne Cricket Club. And we collect historical and biographical material and a bit of technique as well. So it's a very good historical collection. Our earliest book is from 1611. It's a dictionary with the first published reference to cricket. And we collect not just Australian but international cricket material. Mostly, 95% of it in English, but there is some in sort of Urdu or Hindi or Danish. There's Italian. There's a few, diverse languages that we have cricket material.
It is a fabulous space for any sports or cricket lover. Now, speaking of history then, the last time the MCG hosted a women's test match was back in 1949. What can you tell us about that match, David?
Well, it very different to today. It was a 3-day test, Ali. All of the women's tests in those days were 3-day matches. Not many led to a result, as you can imagine, trying to get a result in 3 days. It was played on, the full ground, which will be a bit different to now with the shorter boundaries that we have, not just in women's cricket, but in men's cricket as well. But they played on the full boundary. It was a draw, of course. Australia started well. They scored 260-odd runs. They got England out relatively cheaply, mainly due to Peggy Antonio, who took 6 for 49. She's the only woman on the MCG Test honours board.
What did the MCG itself look like back in 1949?
Well, the only thing that's left today would be, I'd say, 2/3 of the fence in front of the Shane Horn stand would be the only thing that any of them would recognise.
Wow.
And they probably wouldn't even recognise that with the lighting in front of the fence these days. All of the stands have been replaced. You've got to think about, in our history since 1854 with the first match, there's been 18 different stands built across the years. We're constantly rebuilding, making the ground better for the members and for the public, for the people of Victoria and Australia. So none of the stands that were there are there now. So the women in those days actually used the change rooms in the Grey Smith stand, which was where the men had their change rooms as well. One thing I'll point out that was very unusual that happened both in 1935 and in 1949 is the MCC committee, Melbourne Cricket Club committee, had dinners and lunches for the different teams that were coming from England and for the Australians. So when women couldn't be members, they had them into the committee room and gave them a lunch in 1935 and a dinner in 1949.
So women couldn't be members back then?
No, not until 1984.
Before it happened at MCC at Lords. Hasten to add.
It was.
Yeah,
but
it was.
It was a test well before. I mean, they still haven't had a women's test at Lords, but there's one coming up in the next...
in the pipeline, yeah.
Yeah.
Now tell me, do you have any particular artefacts in the library from that 1949 Test match?
We have quite a few in both the general library collection and part of we host the Australian Women's Cricket Council's archives. So at the moment we have a big display on women's cricket and relating to the past Ashes tours from the two matches at the MCG, as well as some more recent ones in Victoria. And there's a program from the 1949 Test at the MCG. There's other programs from across that tour as well. And there's a photograph album on display that was Una Paisley, the vice-captain of the Australian team, her photograph album. So it's open at the moment with the photo of the two Mollies, the two captains, Molly Dive and Molly Hyde. Molly Dive is tossing the coin while Molly Hyde calls. And there's photos of the raising of the Australian flag for Australia Day, which took place during that match, and also a series of action shots from the match. Tiny little beautiful black and white photographs typical of the day from the 1940s. The players, sitting outside the change rooms, going out to bat on the field. There's some fabulous photos in that album.
I know you usually do a display, don't you, during men's matches, whatever it is, in the library. Is there going to be something specifically around this Test match that's ongoing during
Absolutely.
the game?
It's up, and we start with programs from 1934-35 tour, England's first tour, the first women's international series. We have all of the programs from the Australian and New Zealand leg, and they're out on display at the moment, with a whole range of press clippings as well. So the three tests from 1934-35, the exhibition ground in Brisbane, Sydney Cricket Ground and Melbourne Cricket Ground, they're on display. And then we have material relating from the 1948-49 series, as I was saying, the photograph album and a range of programs and photographs there. There's a gorgeous little invitation card from the England team to the committee of the Australian Women's Cricket Council to a farewell reception before they head off to the New Zealand part of the tour at the end of the 1948-49 tour. And there's a range of material from the 1958 series, Betty Wilson's famous test down at St Kilda where she scores a century and takes 10 wickets in the match. And we tend to finish off in this exhibition with the Jubilee series in 1984-85, which was the only women's 5-test series that was played. There were 5 4-day tests in Perth, in Adelaide, in Brisbane, and then they played 2 country games, one in New South Wales at Gosford, and then the Victorian test was at Bendigo on the ground where the first women's cricket match in Australia took place in 1874.
That was David Studham, the librarian at the Melbourne Cricket Club. Well, that is all we've got time for on this week's Stumped. My thanks to Clint, Wheeldon, Charu, Sharma, and to all of you for listening, and we'll speak to you again next week. Until then, bye for now.